The Forbidden Castle. In the heart of the Carpathian Mountains, ensconced within a dense and eerie forest, stood the Castle of Shadows. Its dark turrets pierced the sky, and its ancient walls whispered secrets of a malevolent past. The castle was once the domain of Countess Elisabetta, a woman whose beauty was only rivaled by her cruelty. Her legend had seeped into the very stones of the castle, making it a place of dread and mystery. On a stormy night, a letter arrived at the doorstep of Dr. Jonathan Harker, a renowned historian specializing in European folklore. The letter was written in elegant, archaic script and bore the seal of the Castle of Shadows. It was an invitation from the current owner, Baroness Alona, to study the castle's extensive library. Curiosity piqued, Jonathan accepted the invitation, unaware of the darkness that awaited him. He set off for the castle, leaving behind the bustling city for the desolate wilderness of the Carpathians. Jonathan's journey was fraught with ominous signs. The villagers he encountered along the way urged him to turn back, their faces pale with fear at the mention of the castle. Undeterred, Jonathan pressed on, his scholarly interest overpowering their warnings. As he approached the castle, the weather grew more severe. The wind howled like a banshee, and the trees seemed to reach out with skeletal hands. Finally, he arrived at the gates of the Castle of Shadows. Jonathan was greeted by the enigmatic Baroness Alona, a woman of striking beauty and an air of melancholy. She welcomed him warmly, though her eyes held a glint of something sinister. "The castle holds many secrets, Dr. Harker," as she said. "I trust you will find your stay enlightening." The castle's library was a vast, dusty room filled with ancient tomes and manuscripts. Jonathan immersed himself in the texts, uncovering tales of Countess Elisabetta's reign of terror. The Countess was said to have bathed in the blood of young women to preserve her youth, a practice that earned her the moniker the Crimson Countess. As Jonathan delved deeper, he began to experience strange occurrences. He heard whispers in the halls, saw fleeting shadows, and felt an icy chill that seemed to emanate from the very walls. One night, Jonathan discovered a hidden portrait of Countess Elisabetta in a secret alcove. The painting was life-sized, and the Countess's eyes seemed to follow him. As he stared at the portrait, he felt a sudden, overwhelming sense of dread. The Countess's beauty was undeniable, but her eyes held a cold, malevolent gleam.
Jonathan's nights were plagued by nightmares.
He dreamed of the Countess rising from her grave, her blood-soaked hands reaching out to him. One morning, he awoke to find a message scrawled in blood on his mirror: "Leave or suffer her wrath." Determined to uncover the truth, Jonathan ignored the warning. He continued his research, piecing together the dark history of the castle and its inhabitants. In the deepest recesses of the library, Jonathan found an ancient journal belonging to a former servant of the Countess. The journal detailed the horrific rituals performed by Elisabetta and her descent into madness. It spoke of a hidden chamber beneath the castle, where the Countess conducted her most depraved acts. Jonathan was horrified but resolute. He had to find this chamber and put an end to the Countess's legacy of terror. Armed with the knowledge from the journal, Jonathan ventured into the bowels of the castle. The air grew colder, and the darkness seemed to press in on him. Finally, he found the entrance to the hidden chamber, concealed behind a false wall in the dungeon. The chamber was a ghastly sight. The walls were stained with centuries-old blood, and the air was thick with the stench of death. In the center of the room stood an ornate, blood-stained altar. As Jonathan approached the altar, he felt a presence behind him. He turned to find the spectral form of Countess Elisabetta, her eyes burning with hatred. "Why have you come here?" The Countess's voice echoed, cold and hollow. "I seek to end your reign of terror," Jonathan replied, his voice steady despite his fear. The Countess laughed, a chilling sound that sent shivers down his spine. "You are but a mortal. You cannot stop me." Jonathan drew a silver crucifix from his coat, holding it up as a shield. The Countess recoiled, hissing in fury. "You may have your beauty," Jonathan said, "but you have lost your soul." With a final desperate surge of strength, Jonathan thrust the crucifix toward the Countess. She screamed, her form dissolving into a wisp of smoke. The chamber began to collapse, the walls crumbling as the Countess's power was broken. Jonathan fled the collapsing chamber, barely escaping with his life. The castle shook violently, as if exorcising the malevolent spirit that had haunted it for centuries. At dawn, Jonathan left the Castle of Shadows, the once imposing structure now a mere ruin. The villagers greeted him with awe and gratitude, their fear lifted with the Countess's demise. Back in his study, Jonathan penned his account of the events at the Castle of Shadows. He hoped that his story would serve as a warning to those who might be tempted by the darkness that had consumed Countess Elisabetta. Though the Countess was gone, her legend would live on, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lie in the shadows of history. Jonathan, determined to uncover the full extent of Countess Elisabetta's dark legacy, explored deeper into the castle. He followed a series of cryptic symbols etched into the walls, leading him to a hidden passage behind the library. The air grew colder and the silence more oppressive as he descended into the depths of the castle. At the end of the passage, Jonathan entered a vast underground chamber. Dimly lit by flickering torches, he saw rows of ancient torture devices and blood-stained walls. The sight was a testament to the Countess's cruelty and madness. Amidst the grim relics, he found an altar covered in arcane symbols, the centerpiece of Elisabetta's gruesome rituals. As Jonathan approached the altar, a spectral figure materialized before him. It was the ghost of a young woman, one of Elisabetta's many victims. Her eyes were filled with sorrow and pain. "Please," she whispered, "free us from her curse." Jonathan vowed to help, but before he could act, the chamber trembled, and a cold wind swept through. The presence of Countess Elisabetta grew stronger, and her malevolent laughter echoed around him. Countess Elisabetta's spectral form appeared, more menacing than ever. Her eyes burned with an unholy fire, and her voice dripped with malice. "You dare to defile my sanctuary?" she hissed. Jonathan stood his ground, holding up the silver crucifix. "Your reign of terror ends tonight, Elisabetta." The Countess laughed, a chilling sound that reverberated through the chamber. "You are a fool, Jonathan Harker. My power is eternal." The Countess lunged at Jonathan, her spectral form swirling with dark energy. Jonathan dodged, narrowly avoiding her grasp. He chanted an ancient incantation he had discovered in the journal, words of power meant to banish evil spirits. The Countess screamed in rage as the incantation weakened her. She fought back with all her might, summoning dark shadows to attack Jonathan. He defended himself with the crucifix, the holy symbol burning brightly in the darkness. Jonathan reached the altar, where he placed the crucifix and continued the incantation. The Countess shrieked, her form flickering as the power of the crucifix and the incantation took hold. "You cannot defeat me," she cried, her voice filled with desperation. Jonathan's voice rose above hers. "By the power of light, I banish you, Elisabetta. Return to the darkness from whence you came." With a final ear-piercing scream, Countess Elisabetta's spectral form disintegrated into a cloud of smoke. The chamber shook violently, and the dark energy dissipated. The chamber grew silent and still. Jonathan, exhausted but victorious, looked around. The spirits of Elisabetta's victims began to appear, their faces no longer twisted in pain but serene and grateful. Thank you," they whispered as they faded away, finally at peace. Jonathan made his way back through the hidden passage, the weight of the ordeal heavy on his shoulders. As he emerged from the depths of the castle, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon. The Castle of Shadows, once a place of horror, now stood as a silent monument to the past. Jonathan returned to the village, where the people greeted him with awe and relief. The curse of Countess Elisabetta had been lifted, and a sense of peace settled over the land. Back in his study, Jonathan meticulously documented his experiences at the Castle of Shadows. He knew that his account would serve as a warning to future generations about the dangers of unchecked power and the depths of human depravity. Though the Countess was defeated, Jonathan could not forget the horrors he had witnessed. The Castle of Shadows and its dark history would remain in his memory, a reminder of the eternal struggle between good and evil.